Okay.
All right, welcome to the Independent Producers Organization Live Showcase. That was a good introduction. It told you what we're all about. You know, we bring in folks who are, sometimes we bring in producers, talk about their programs, or we bring in folks from the community and talk about issues that is close to their hearts and that it's out there for community information as well. We've been doing the show for a number of years now, once a month on the second Wednesday of the month. It used to be the second Thursday. But since PCM is closed now on Thursdays, it's a different issue. But we're going to talk tonight about returning veterans. We have as a guest Belle Landau with the Returning Veterans Project. It was set up by with my co-host here, Richard Carpenter, who also produces through Tualatin Valley. You still do out there, don't you?
Well, I'm on the show. We have a show called Infotainment.
Oh, you're doing
Yeah.
You're doing it.
Right.
Tim's old show.
Right. Well, he's still around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when he's in town, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So, but anyway, you contact her. Actually, we were contacted by Denise Kowalczyk out there at the Metro East Community Media, and Belle has been looking for platforms to talk about the issue. And obviously, Returning Veterans Project is pretty obvious what the issue's about. But we'll just move right into this, Belle, and let us know what well, obviously what it's about, but what brought you to this particular?
Okay.
You say you've done
And
a lot
tell
of
us a little about yourself.
You've done,
Okay,
yeah, and yourself.
yeah.
You've done a lot of what do you call it? The
Nonprofit work,
So
right,
you
right.
kind of ended up here.
I
At
did.
least for
I
now.
did. So my work history includes working for nonprofits that serve women and children and families. So child abuse prevention, sexual assault, teen pregnancy, those kinds of issues. And then I was an old lady looking for a job a few years ago. You know, and it takes a while nowadays when you're of a certain age. So
like over 40 these days.
I know, right? So a friend of mine said she had heard about a job that she thought would be perfect for me, and she told me to apply, and that's how I became the director of the Returning Veterans Project.
Had you heard of it before?
I had not, and that was almost 5 years ago. And I really, really love this work. And part of the reason I decided to do this was that my youngest son was in the Navy for 8 years and went in during a time of peace in 1999 and his ship ended up in the Gulf during that shock and awe period of the Iraq War. And he was a missile technician, and his destroyer shot more missiles into Baghdad than any other ship.
Oh.
And it's something that he just will not talk about.
He's probably
so-
not real proud of it. And
Probably not, yeah. The military was good to him. On a GED and Navy training, he installs navigational systems in big ships all over the world. Makes a heck of a lot more money than I do working for a nonprofit.
Oh, of course.
But he's a great dad and a great human being, so the Navy was good to him. But through this project, I've met people who aren't doing so well after their military service. And that's why we exist. We are a nonprofit that provides free, confidential counseling and other mental health services like addictions counseling, couples counseling, as well as massage therapy, acupuncture, chiropractic, and naturopathic
Really?
care. And it's all free and confidential because we ask licensed, insured practitioners who are independent in the community to open at least one pro bono slot in their practice for these folks. And
Is this for their stress related?
stress related, whatever they need. And so we have 154 volunteer practitioners doing this for us
Oh.
today. We have about 5 in Vancouver, Washington, and then all throughout the Portland area, we probably have about 100 in the Portland metro area. And then some in Bend and Redmond and Ashland, Grants Pass and Medford.
What does pro bono spot mean? An
Free.
hour of their day or something?
Yeah, they agree to take one client at a time and to serve them just as they would any paying client. So if you have a vet who has really severe PTSD that requires weekly counseling for 2 years, that's what they do. If you see somebody who needs a massage to get over some kind of an injury, like a shoulder injury, then they do 8 sessions or whatever it takes for that client to get better. If you have a spouse that needs stress relief, maybe wants acupuncture, however you would serve somebody with that issue, that's how they agree to do their pro bono work. Last year, we had 153 active providers donate 3,843 hours of free services worth over $450,000 to 394 current war vets and active duty service members. They included National Guard and reservists, and 160 spouses, children, parents, and
Wow.
other close relatives
Do
Now,
they
this
call
is just
you?
in the Portland area?
throughout Oregon. Yeah.
Do they call you at all to
You know, sometimes
volunteer?
we'll get phone calls from, you mean from providers?
Yeah, anybody.
Yeah, we get a lot of information referral phone calls. So people actually from around the country, moms of veterans, veterans themselves, fathers, uncles, aunts, looking for services for a vet in Minnesota, in Tennessee, in Texas, and then people here who might not have internet access, because the way that we keep it confidential is that we have the directory right on our website, returningveterans.org. You go to the Find a Provider page, and there's a drop-down menu of all the services: acupuncture, mental health, chiropractic. You click on the service that you want. There's a box where you can enter your city, and you click the apply button, and then if we have providers who are open to take a new client, their contact, bless you, their contact information comes up, and the vet or family member calls that provider directly and says, I am the wife of a vet who served in Iraq or whatever. I'm a vet who served in Afghanistan, and I would like free Returning Veterans Project services. So they schedule the appointment themselves.
So you talking, this is not just Oregon.
Right, Southwest Washington. Right now
So
we
it's
just
just
have people in Vancouver, but
So it's just right local, right here. But
it is, yeah. And it was started in 2005 by a local therapist named Carol Levine, who's retired now. She's in her 70s. She remembered the war in Vietnam,
of
how
course.
people were treated when they came home. She was listening to the news,
Oh.
2004, and was thinking, you know, I can almost imagine what it feels like, is what she says, to be in a war zone and then to come right home and to try to get back into your life, and how hard that would be.
We've had people talk about that.
Yeah.
And how difficult that is
Yeah,
to adjust and come in.
Absolutely.
Joink, here you are.
right.
Start working tomorrow.
And so she started talking to her friends, saying, you know, I want to do something, but all I know how to do is therapy. I wonder if that would be
That's
helpful.
all, huh?
Yeah, I wonder if that would be helpful. And her friends all said, yes, you have to do it. So in 2 days, she gathered 25 other local therapists, and they started putting this organization together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
There's an organization here in the area. It started off in Texas. You might have heard of it. I forget the name of it, unfortunately, where it's you pay a certain amount of money a month, and there's a whole bunch of different, very few medical doctors, but a lot of doctors are naturopaths and acupuncturists that I guess, you know, just like a regular health insurance thing. Are you familiar with that at all?
well, there's Project Quest for cancer survivors and other folks, and then I know that there's another project. I think they have an office on Hawthorne, around where the theater is, around 20th.
Yeah, I'm not too
Yeah, and I
sure.
can't remember the name of it, but I think that you do pay so much a month, and then you can get as many acupuncture and massage treatments
Yeah,
as you
I
want.
should check
Yeah.
into that to make sure. That might be useful information.
Yeah,
They might
yeah.
just sign on, and all those
Right.
doctors and make themselves available.
There's also a really cool veterans acupuncture project, and they, I think it's 2 acupuncturists. They meet in a church in Southeast Portland every Thursday, I think it is, and then any vet from any era can come and get group acupuncture for free. And if you just Google free acupuncture in Portland for veterans, then you'll find the site.
Group acupuncture?
Yeah.
What does that
Well,
exactly
It
mean?
means you sit in a circle and you get acupuncture along with everybody else.
When you, but sometimes you can't be getting the needles if you're sitting. So
I think they probably use reclining chairs.
reclining chairs.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
what working class acupuncture
Yeah,
uses. They
yeah.
let you out, or put you down on a real sofa, and like kind of like the psychologist or psychiatrist couch, and stick the needles in you. But I just
Yeah.
recently went to an acupuncture and had some acupuncture
great,
done.
isn't it?
And this I have done it once. I've done it before and it didn't work out as well. But this worked really well.
Good, good.
Really?
I'm glad.
And
it's been really helpful for me.
It was a place
too.
called
Yeah.
Mercy and Wisdom. If you're
Oh,
familiar
that's-
with them.
No, that's nice.
It's that's something you might check out.
Okay.
It was a Chinese woman, and she really, of course, me, I'm always jabbering at people, and found a lot of information about what they do, and it's so important for folks that are returning. You know, like you were saying, the coming back from in a war zone, or even just in a place where it's extreme regimentation.
Even basic training. Yeah.
Yeah, your regimentation, and then you come back and you have all this open space, so to
Right,
speak.
right. Or a
and-
Walmart with way too much stuff.
That same,
to look at you.
yeah,
Yeah,
sure, and you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so sure it sounds like you're providing an incredible. I mean, you see
Yeah.
stuff on TV all the time about wounded warriors and
Right,
all these different
right,
things, but I
right.
think you're getting right down to the actual
We're
health.
trying to. We're trying to. We do a lot of couples counseling. We also have practitioners who work with kids, young children, and adolescents during and after deployments, because a lot of the research shows that young children with parents deployed tend to have a harder time mental health-wise while the person is deployed. So there's more hospitalizations for young kids for mental health issues. And then, as you might imagine, if you've raised an adolescent, adolescents have a harder time after the person comes back home from a deployment because they've got abandonment issues. And then they, say it's your mother and she comes back home and immediately starts telling you what to do again. And she's been gone for 12 or 14 months. Well, it's like, sorry, you don't know me anymore. I'm very different than when you left. You can't tell me what to do anymore, which adolescents kind of tend to do anyway,
I was just
right?
going to say they have authority issues
I know.
out of the
it
gate.
just compounds those issues. So people's roles in families tend to change during deployments. If the wife is the spouse left behind, she takes on a lot of things that she wouldn't do maybe when her husband was home. And then the same with dad. If he's home, he's doing all the parenting. And maybe the child was not even a year old when mom left for a deployment. So
Sure.
there's attachment issues when people come home. If the baby doesn't know you anymore, you have to start all over again.
Speaking of that,
Yeah.
I was curious about men and women. If they're, when they come in, are there different needs or?
Unfortunately.
That's a good question, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, women who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan have greater rates of PTSD, and they're becoming homeless faster than men who served. And many of them have children, so you have families becoming homeless. And for a lot of women and for some men, the issue, unfortunately, is military sexual trauma. So at the Portland VA in 2012, for veterans entering the VA system for the first time, however they came into the VA, they were asked if they were a military sexual trauma, if they had military sexual trauma experience, which can mean sexual harassment or sexual assault by another military member. And 33% of the women reported that had been their experience.
And that's a baseline. Some aren't going to admit it.
Right, and 1 out of 100 men are thought to also have been victimized in that way while they serve. So
By other men?
Yes, yeah.
It can
I
happen.
suppose there could
Yeah.
be women perpetrators as well, but the majority are by other men or by groups of men.
Harassment.
Yeah, or
kind of
yeah,
thing.
gang rape is not uncommon. So for women, the more women have PTSD due to sexual assault than to being in a war zone. So that's an issue that we've really focused on. We also do free clinical trainings for our providers to make sure that they're doing best practice services. And so we've done 4 around the state on military sexual trauma, and we're doing another training in Bend on July 18th on the issue of veteran suicide prevention, and then also on military sexual trauma. So we'll be there in July.
That abbreviation you had, we better say what that is.
MST, military sexual trauma.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. A
Audience
really
needs to know.
good film, if you're interested in this issue, is The Invisible War. It was a documentary that was nominated for an Academy Award in 2012. And our military sexual trauma consultant is nationally known for her work on this issue. She's a local therapist, Elizabeth Stinson, and she does most of the trainings for us. And she was a consultant on that film, and several of the women in that film were her clients. And
Where would that be shown? Or?
you can get it like on the public television website. It's an independent lens film now, and you can see excerpts of it, and you can probably purchase it.
You can get a trailer of it on
Right.
YouTube.
Oh.
I've seen the trailer,
Yeah,
and actually,
yeah.
they actually played it on TV.
It's pretty intense. I need a lot of chocolate, when I sit and watch it.
And handkerchiefs.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
pretty. It's
intense.
People,
Yeah.
they're talking more and more about the military sexual trauma
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the corporate news, and the coverage, but they don't go into it near as deep as it is. It's
In that film, yeah.
It's incredibly pervasive.
It is an issue for women has been that they often, when they report, they get dishonorably discharged, and then they don't qualify for services. at the VA.
Mm-hmm.
But in 2010 that changed, and now the VA, if you are an MST survivor, they have to give you counseling services.
What could the women have done? I understand.
The sexual assault was by a married man, so they committed adultery. That's what women have been
And
charged
for
with.
that, they get a
For
dishonor.
being sexually assaulted by somebody who's married, yeah.
Same old deal.
Yeah.
But it isn't
So-
always
Yeah.
a complete, they don't have intercourse necessarily to be assaulted.
Right, right, molested, whatever, yeah. And there are very few people who go through military court and are convicted. And until recently, command could overturn a conviction. I think Congress just changed that. I don't know when it's going to be enacted, but at least that piece was changed. You still have to report a sexual assault directly to the person in command
Okay.
above you, and 40% of the assaults are committed by somebody in command. So that you report to your offender.
Well, I know that just recently there was a female congressperson tried to get a bill passed to take
Yes.
it out of the chain of
Right,
command,
right.
and all the wusses in Congress wouldn't go for it.
No, even
You
the
know,
Democrats, a lot of
Even
them.
oh yeah, Democrats, you know.
Didn't
I-
matter
I-
what side you're on.
No,
Yeah.
sometimes I even Democrats myself. When you really get down to it, it's just
They're just politicians,
both,
right?
They're both wings of the same bird.
I know,
You
I
know,
know.
so. But there's just so much we've just laid out already that we can go into
We
deeper.
have,
And
we
there's,
have.
I would like to ask one quick question. You
Sure.
probably have no answer. Is there any, since PTSD has become a certifiable problem
Diagnosis,
for diagnosis for medical marijuana, has there been any move to try to make that easier for people?
You know,
It's just
there's
brand new,
There's
so
there have been a
Yeah.
couple of research studies on using it with vets, and I think they've had some success. And I think a lot of vets probably do it on their own.
on their own.
Yeah, yeah,
But
especially in
then they-
Colorado and Washington,
Right,
maybe.
but they put themselves at risk that way too.
If you're still active duty and you have PTSD and you do that, you can be kicked out. Yeah, it's not a good thing. I remember when my son was in the Navy, the quickest way to get off the ship was to be caught smoking pot. And alcohol, though, was pretty okay.
No, yeah.
You know, he was 18 when he went in and still had a lot of access to alcohol.
Just have a
but-
pack of zigzags sticking out of your pocket. Was probably all it would take. Rolling
Well,
papers.
One of the problems is it's federal. It's against the marijuana.
Yeah, yeah.
Oregon, it's
Yeah.
okay with us, and where else?
Like there's 20 states
California
now.
or
It's
what?
almost half. It's almost half the states.
Yeah, and I think most people agree that it's probably a good thing to legalize it and get some money from it.
Well, didn't Congress just pass something that says that they're going to stop any money being spent by the Justice Department on
Oh.
prosecuting and
Oh,
going
really?
into these dispensaries and raising hell with these folks?
They did say that?
So
Oh,
yeah, I'm pretty
that's
sure I
good.
saw that.
Okay.
That has an effect, doesn't it?
Okay.
And you know, once they back off, then so much of this, you know, the feds being against it and can come down at any time,
Yeah.
it's created a lot of issues with people that need it, but they won't do it because it's against the law.
Yeah,
And then, you know,
yeah.
I had not necessarily that way with everybody, but I'm thinking the Vietnam vets, they would, you know, they come from a different era. But if the folks coming back from the war zones now might have
Yeah.
a little more stringent box that they put that
Well,
in.
you know, they're given opiates when they're in theater, so, you know, if they're having problems,
For
they're,
pain.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're
opiates.
highly medicated.
Oh,
Extremely.
Opiates, sleeping, Ambien for sleep, drugs for depression, and then they come home and, you know, it's kind of a mess for some people.
And they probably
Yeah.
still give them those drugs through the VA, which is an issue. And if they don't, then they can get them on the street, which puts
Yeah,
them in that.
at risk.
That is some
right.
dangerous stuff. All that, and
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
of people who have cut their use of those opiates by half by the medical marijuana, even stopped using it completely.
Yeah.
And that is something that, especially with this PTSD, and you know, you can have. I know a person that come down with, you know, he got some kind of thing from the government, disability. I think it was in the 90s or late 90s, early 2000, and you know, he was in Vietnam, and it took that long for PTSD to become
To
aware
show
that
up,
that
yeah.
was what that was an issue with him.
I know. When Iraq and Afghanistan, when we went to war, the VA became flooded with Vietnam era vets who had never been in before and were triggered. You know, I think that happens every time with people. So, you know, whatever happens in the future, we need to make sure that these folks are getting treatment. We know the VA is overloaded. You know, my colleagues at the
yeah,
VA
I was going to ask
are
about
fabulous. They love what they do. They're so good to the people they treat, but the system is overloaded. You know, it's such a burden on the system. It's not made to treat the number of vets who are coming into treatment and the number of older, aging vets with multiple issues like cancer and diabetes and heart disease that's really impacting the system.
Oh, well, don't they need to bring in more doctors
That's
from
exactly.
somewhere?
There needs to be funding to get more providers, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Primary physicians, counselors, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we spend as much on defense as the next 7 or 8 countries in the world below us combined. But we still can't take care of our returning vets. It's
shameful.
criminal.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
hard.
That's why we do what we do. We believe it's also the community's job to help heal war zone wounds, both short-term and long-term. So that's
Good.
why we exist. And that's why our model is based on practitioners who provide pro bono services. And we have some practitioners who are veterans themselves, and they are serving like 5 clients at a time for us, pro bono. That's a lot of money, you know, $100 an hour, 5 clients a week, that's a lot of money. So
That they're not
And a
getting.
lot of their
that
time.
they're not getting, yeah. They're so generous, the providers that we work with. We're just very grateful to them. We couldn't do what we do without them. And we have some really cool corporate partners. Regent sponsored Returning Veterans Project Float in the Grand Floor Parade.
I
Did
didn't
you
know
see
that.
it?
No, I didn't.
It was
I didn't
great.
go to that.
And we found some vets willing to sit on the float or stand on the float and go the length of the parade. And there were cheers all along the way, and they felt really good about it. So
That was
it was good.
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah, it was really cool.
Well, I know when I first got involved with public access, the first couple of shows I did was on Gulf War Syndrome. And there was not Vets for Peace, it was Northwest Vets for Peace at the time.
oh.
And it was a different group.
Yeah.
And they were saying that, you know, the Vietnam vet folks, you know, with Agent Orange, they were stepping forward. But the folks coming from, at that time, Afghanistan and Iraq, weren't as forthcoming about their problems over there, their trauma and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
their PTSD. Is that changing? I guess.
You know, it takes a while. There still is a really strong stigma in the military around asking for help. You know, you're still
Deliberately.
you're still
Oh.
considered a malingerer by. It depends on who your commander is. If it's some of the old guard folks, you know, you just don't ask for help. You just buck up and get through it. And so it really depends on what your experience is in your unit and if it was okay to say that you were having a bad day or whatever. And then folks that it wasn't okay, they come home and they just will not talk about it. So we actually have almost 80 just mental health counselors in the city of Portland alone, and only 6 are open to take a new client right now. And some of our providers have been calling for other resources because they're starting to see these young vets already homeless or about to be incarcerated who need support, need a lawyer, need housing. They've waited a long time, more than 5 years, so they're not able to enroll for VA services anymore. And their lives are in crisis and falling apart. Maybe they've lost a relationship, a family, and things are kind of getting bad. So if there are providers out there, we really need you to come to the website, take a look, and apply. And just donate one slot. That's all we need.
From each one of you out there.
Yeah, massage, acupuncture, chiropractic. You know, when folks in Iraq and Afghanistan, when they're on a mission, they wear and carry equipment that can weigh up to 100 pounds. And they're coming home with a lot of shoulder and neck injuries
Really? I
and
didn't
back
know
and
that.
knee
That's a
injuries
new
because they're
one.
jumping out of helicopters and out of trucks.
Well, they're
And-
doing that with weight too.
With weight. And for a lot of the women, especially those who served early in the Marines and the Army, they didn't have boots that fit them. They were wearing men's boots and men's helmets. So a lot
were
of them were
loose.
taking their helmets off when they were being fired on because they slipped down on their head and they couldn't see. And so for those who served early on, some of the injuries are pretty long lasting. And our chiropractors and massage therapists are always full. We can never have too many of those folks. So if you're a chiropractor or a naturopath or an acupuncturist or a massage therapist, come join us.
There
We would
was
love to have
there
you.
was a lot of issues with not just that particular piece of equipment too. There was issues with their vests.
The Kevlar vests.
Kevlar vests.
Yep,
They got some
yep.
bad ones. There was even a show on Law and Order about that. And, you know, it was probably a made-up story, but
The
it
trucks and
developed
stuff
what was
that
going
they,
on.
Yeah,
The
that
trucks,
didn't have armor.
the Hummers
and-
that didn't have
yeah,
armor.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you send people out there with a truck that doesn't have armor on the floorboards.
and that's where the IED
Oh,
right,
goes off,
right,
and then, you know, that's
right.
why you get so many injuries.
Yeah.
You know, Vietnam, a lot of people lost 52,000 people in Vietnam, something like that. But a lot more of them, percentage-wise, were killed there.
I
But we
know,
got a lot
I
better
know.
medical now, so a lot more of them are coming home.
Yeah. I met with a group of caregivers last year. The VA started paying caregivers, taking care of our most wounded warriors. So people with PTSD and a traumatic brain injury. And there's a coordinator up at the VA that runs that program. And I spoke to about, I think it was about 10, they were all wives or fiancés and one mom. And they were all caring for young vets who were in their chair all day. They wouldn't leave the chair. They couldn't be left alone with the kids. Each of those families had 2 or 3 little ones, like under age 3. And mom was caring for everybody. And dad wasn't able, they were all male soldiers. Dad wasn't able to be left alone with the kids because he would forget they were there, or he would do something inappropriate. Like one mom said he gave the kids a bath, took them out, and then just left the water running in the tub. And it overflowed just because of the brain injury and not remembering. And it was very sad for me to be there, but really glad that at least for those families, the caregiver is getting a stipend every month to help the family get through what they need to get through.
Yeah.
But
Because it affects the family. You know, those 3-year-old kids,
Oh.
20 years down the road, if they're not, if
Yeah.
the father doesn't get the proper care,
I know.
there's going to be issues down the road. That's going to be a
Absolutely.
burden on society as well.
absolutely. Yeah, that's what I worry about is the kids, yeah. The military is now made up of about 16% women, and they
Wow.
expect it to be 20% in the next few years. So that's a huge change. And Oregon has had a huge number of women deploy with the same time with their husbands. So we've had couples deployed through
Really?
the Oregon National Guard
In the
at
exact
the
same
same
place?
time. Nope, maybe different places,
That's
but
what I
at the
would
same
think.
time. Or yeah, but so the kids are left with a guardian, often grandparents or siblings or something. And you know, these deployments have been long, a lot of them. The we
Longest
have
war in our history, I think.
Yep, we're on what, 13 years now
Yeah.
in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, yeah.
Oh boy, amazing.
I thought Vietnam went on forever, but short compared to this.
know,
Every
I know.
war is different. They're always different.
Yeah, but same in some ways. You know, what you have to do during war is pretty similar. Yeah, and what you come home with, I think, is pretty similar. And in Oregon, the stats right now are that we have 31,000 current war vets that live here. There's over 300,000 vets from World War II on up in Oregon, and we are one of only 6 states without an active duty base. Yet, I think it's about 25% of our citizens are veterans, which is a huge number. And our National Guard per capita has been deployed more times than any other state's National Guard, except for Louisiana.
I
think
know the
that'd be
South.
right. Just seems like they're always going. for
Yeah,
kids.
and another 900 folks are leaving in a week or 2 for Afghanistan. And I think a few in the engineering unit. I think it's 2 to the 162, but I wouldn't swear to that. I can't ever remember that stuff, but I should.
Where are they going? Afghanistan?
They're going to Afghanistan, and then the engineering folks, I think there's only 3 or 4 of them. They're going to be going to Kuwait and then into Afghanistan and back to Kuwait and into Afghanistan as needed.
We keep hearing about all this falderall, the president stumping that it's ending and he's bringing everybody back, and here we are.
Well,
we're not bringing them all
these
back.
900 folks, their task is going to be leading the other soldiers and Marines out of Afghanistan. So it's going to be really dangerous, I'm afraid. And they're supposed to be there for 12 months. So that's their job, is to go in front, right, and look for IEDs and get
I
them out of there.
don't think your regular soldiers are there for 12 months at a time, are they?
No.
They go back.
The
but they're
Guard
never-
members are deployed longer than
what I'm
Army
thinking,
and
yeah.
Marines. Yeah, yeah.
That always sounded really strange to me.
I know.
You know,
I
that everything seems backwards.
I know. And about 40% of the 900, from what I've heard, are brand new and they're young and they've never been deployed. And then the
okay.
rest have been deployed 2 or 3, 4 times. So
It's interesting how there's nothing in between.
I know. Yeah.
You know, it's just insane to me, this whole thing. It's criminal how our country has gone into wars, but we could go into a whole show on that one.
That's a whole different show, isn't it? Yeah.
But
yeah.
you know, I know there's actually been peace groups that have been involved in trying to stop,
Yeah.
you know, the movement of the National Guard from Oregon,
yeah.
and not very much
Yeah.
success either.
Yeah. And I think the state gets money when your Guard
Yeah.
gets deployed.
Yeah, that's
know.
all,
I don't know how
follow,
much.
Follow the money.
And I also, it's the 41st Brigade, and they've got a lot of combat experience, so I think that's why they're going. You know,
Yeah, if you have a lot of combat experience, it means you have a lot of casualties.
I know.
So, and then they end up coming
They
to
go
folks like
again,
you.
and yeah, yeah.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
it seems to me that the main three things we've talked about, and one we haven't talked much about yet, it was the military sexual trauma, and we haven't talked much about homelessness, and we haven't talked anything yet about suicide. And do you
Suicide,
provide
yeah.
specific help for this sort of thing?
We do. You know, people who come in and are suicidal, yeah, our providers will serve them.
Okay.
We have a lot of people who specialize in trauma treatment
And recognizing.
and recognize the
Yeah.
signs of suicide and are able to help people, you know, get word to the family what to look for and figure out ways that the vet can support themselves. You know, a lot of them come back and they just, we mentioned this, but they feel like they don't fit anymore. And many of them that I've met just want to go right back because it felt okay there.
There was a
Because they
place
were
for 'em.
trained.
Yeah.
And they were with a unit that became a family.
Yeah, right.
You know, that brotherhood among no matter what your gender is very, very strong. And then just to come home and be dispersed, somebody's in Louisiana, somebody's in Texas, and now in Oregon, and you're not connected to that unit anymore. I think that's really, really hard for people is what I'm seeing. And also, I think if you're a mental health provider, one of your main roles when you get through immediate issues and relieving some of the symptoms of PTSD, like the depression and the anger and rage that can come out, and lots of drinking and you know, alcohol, drugs,
Self-medicating.
self-medicating, and maybe some self-injury. After that, it's really important to help people find their purpose again. People like my son who went in at 18 and came out at like 26. The frontal lobe of your brain, you know, doesn't complete its growth until you're 24 or 25. So young men, I think, are sent to war because they'll do it, right? They don't understand the consequences.
They don't know what they're getting into.
They don't know what they're getting
Yeah.
into. And then they bond with these people and do all this really challenging work. They work on a common mission. It feels good to complete it, and then they come home and they're all alone. And people that were close to them and were their family aren't. And truthfully, a lot of people enter the military because their family of origin sucked. They had bad experiences. They were abused as kids. There's no way to work in their community, and so they get away from their family, join this new family, and then it falls apart. And now what do I do? So that's a huge, huge issue for people. So helping them figure out what to do next. There's a great national organization called the Mission Continues, and it was started, I think, by a bunch of Marines, and they help vets who have just come back find a nonprofit that they want to work with. I think it's like 6 months, and you work with them, you get a stipend, and you get to learn what it's like to work for the community and use the skills that you've learned in the military for good when you get back in the community. So that's a great option, I think, for people. And I hope that organization is still being funded. They were around about a year ago.
Now, when someone comes in and they want help specifically to do with finding a job,
Yeah, yeah.
is that,
You know,
what's an example of that?
we don't do that, but we'll help. Our therapists can help people get ready for
Okay.
employment. You know, mentally get ready. And then there are the employment department in Oregon has people specifically that work with veterans on jobs, and also transition projects downtown and
Okay.
Central City Concern are good resources here locally to help them. And then for benefit decisions and appealing benefits, every county has a Veteran Services Officer. And you can just go to the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs website, and there's a list of them statewide, and vets can just contact them, and their sole job is to help a veteran apply for benefits or appeal a benefit decision.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, VA benefits, that's a whole separate department from the hospital. And so the hospital doesn't know anything about the benefits side usually. But the VSOs really are there to help people figure that out and get their applications in and you know,
Right.
try to streamline it for them.
It's a whole lot different than, of course, the complication of the population. There's more people coming back, but I remember when I was taking some junior college classes in the early 70s, late 60s, a lot of these folks coming back from Vietnam, and they were buying houses, and they were really cheap, and they were getting all their books,
It's like
of course,
World War II,
everything.
yeah.
They got everything. It was great, but it isn't
Yeah.
that way anymore, apparently.
You know, it's not as easy, and I think I read a stat last year that said 82% of this most recent group of veterans going into college don't stay in. They're not able to complete it. So a lot of people end up leaving because they can't concentrate, because they have anxiety disorders or whatever, or somebody says something that ticks them off and they can't stay in the classroom. Somebody asks them, you know, due to ignorance, did you kill anybody?
Yeah,
And
that's-
that guy or gal is never going back to that classroom or maybe to that campus again.
Yeah.
So I think the other important issue that I've seen is that how disconnected civilians are from these wars, you know, that have
Yeah.
been going on for so long. And less than 1% of this country has served in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Well, it's like a fantasy land
Yeah.
war because
Yeah.
we've you know, World War II, World War I, the people suffered.
Yeah.
You
yeah,
know,
I was going to
They had to
point
give
out,
up butter and
had to give up
gas
gasoline,
and-
metals.
yeah.
I mean, you know,
Right,
everything.
right.
it wasn't that. It's that the people in the Second World War had such total support.
for the
from
war.
everybody.
Right. The war effort.
This
yeah.
is moderate support.
No, I don't think it's
not
even
even moderate
moderate
anymore.
No, not
It was in
anymore.
the beginning.
I know what Vietnam wasn't, and
After 9/11, it was, but it's not anymore. Yeah,
you know,
it's gone on too long, right?
What's going on too
Korean
long?
War was fairly good support.
Fairly
Fairly.
good, but that was
I don't remember that, so yeah.
Well, yeah,
Well, that's probably why they say it's forgotten.
well, you know, it wasn't. You know, it was a real bugaboo. Fight communism over there before we
Yeah.
have to fight it here,
Right,
and you know
right.
that rang true for a while. But you know, in the '60s, people started seeing through all that crap,
Right, right.
and they realized that it was just a war of aggression. It had to do with economics as much as anything else. And you know, the same thing in Afghanistan and Iraq. There's a lot of things below the surface, you know, the oil they have and the pipeline they want to build through Afghanistan, all these different economic things that we're not hearing about.
Yeah.
But people who pay attention and read on the internet know that there's other issues going on. It isn't. We're not being threatened like we were, you know, Adolf Hitler would have loved to come over here.
You know, we try not to get political because we know that vets and their families, some people, when
Yeah.
they come home, they're totally anti-war now, and other people felt like, you know, it was their role was to serve.
Sure.
When the president says go, I go. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't take a political stand. We just provide the services, and you know,
Sure.
try
I've
to
got
stay.
it.
We all have a view, you know, but we just don't shout
Well,
it out.
I've got a couple anti-war bumper stickers on my car, and I get a lot of thumbs up, and I get a lot of that other
Right,
finger too.
right,
So,
right,
you know,
right.
a lot of strong emotions about
But it's
it.
that way with every stance you take. Not everybody agrees with you, right?
Sure.
Which is okay.
And then, you know, the
That's
level
why
of
we live where we do.
the level of vehemence might change according to the issue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
So let's talk a little bit about the suicide rate.
Yeah.
right, we kind of got
Okay,
away from that.
we
Yeah, the
did.
suicide rate is been more suicides than there has been actually people killed over there.
That's what I've heard. Yeah,
It's
yeah. And in
incredible.
Oregon, our National Guard has had, since 2011, has had the highest rate or the third highest rate of all National Guards in the nation.
Well, it makes sense that we're deployed. Is that broke down
But you
between
know
regular
what?
Army and National Guard?
It's no, this is just
Across
Army
the board.
National Guard in Oregon, higher rate than other guards in the country. I think Minnesota's is also very high. So both of those states, Minnesota and Oregon, have high civilian suicide rates anyway. But the military suicide rates for the young ones, are as high among people never deployed as they are for those who've been deployed 2 or 3 times.
Never
that'd be-
deployed, meaning they're in the
Never
Army,
left
but they're...
Oregon.
Okay, that's
Right.
what I thought.
So
yeah.
they're committing suicide at the same rate almost as somebody who's been deployed a couple
What do you?
times.
Is there a reason?
Anybody got a handle on that?
Yeah.
You know, I think some of the things that we're starting to find out is that rates of childhood trauma are high now for people entering the military. And chances are, if you're 18 when you join the Guard, you haven't had treatment. You haven't even thought about what happened to you as a kid. You join the military. You go through basic training. Being from an abusive childhood myself, just basic training would send me over the edge, right? Somebody in my face yelling at me and telling me I'm scum. I mean, I don't think I
Yeah,
could take
that's
it.
exactly
So-
what happens.
Okay.
so I think for some people, that's it. Some people don't deploy and their buddies do, and they feel guilty about that. So we've had people get depressed and commit suicide or try to complete suicide because of that. I just don't think we really know, but we need to pay attention to the signs. And if somebody says that they're thinking about suicide, they need to get help. The VA has an emergency room. You need to take them to the emergency room or your local emergency room if they're not enrolled at the VA. You know, don't go to a community-based practitioner. First go to an emergency room so they can get an assessment done and see what the risk is, and then find a
Sure.
provider, you know.
Sometimes that rage or whatever that is turned not against themselves, but against people around them.
That can happen.
And that is,
yeah,
you
as we
know, that is even worse in some
Well, and it
ways.
seems like it's happening with younger and younger people who have nothing to do with the military, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
What happened the other day here at Reynolds High School. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of issues, but for me, also for the families. I've talked to so many moms, and I understand what they feel who say, I just want my child back. They're different. I want
Oh,
the same
yes.
child back. And, you know, I have to say, this is an experience that has changed them.
That river flowed on. It's not coming
It's
back.
not coming back. And now you have to get used to your new son or your new daughter and try to understand what they went through and try to get them to understand what you're going through, you know, and come together as a family. And that can be very, very challenging, especially if you do have somebody who has rage issues, who drinks a lot, to try to suppress what they're feeling, to try to numb out. And, you know, it's challenging.
Almost like the parents need help.
Well, that's why we serve
The mother.
parents, because the VA does not. And we feel like it's really important to serve the family if they need it. So that's, you know, that's why we opened it up like that.
Sure. Well, if you can't help the person, you can help the family help the
Right,
person, because
right,
that intermediate there, I
right.
think, would be pretty useful.
Or to help the family understand what's going on. I remember when my son came home the first year, you know, and what he saw was, experienced was shooting the missiles into Baghdad. He wasn't on the ground, he wasn't in combat, but he was in the military. And there was a huge threat at the time. I think the Cole had been bombed during his time in the Gulf, and so a huge threat. And their destroyer policed other ships, so they went on to other ships, and he was one of the people that did that, and to make sure that that ship was who they said they were, and they were doing what they said they were doing. And so he had those kinds of issues, and he came home, and he was very, very different. And I didn't have this job at that time. I wish I had. I would have understood
Little-
it
you had
more.
some insight.
He drove me nuts. I
Okay.
mean, he lived with us for a few weeks, and just a few weeks, and it was challenging because he could not sit still. He was always jumping and leaving and coming home, and then if he was home, the TV had to be on. He couldn't just sit. Or if he was just sitting, he fell asleep. So he was either asleep watching TV or out in his car, you know, or on the phone trying to connect with somebody to do something. That bonus money, the $14,000 that he brought home, the first couple of weeks he took, I think 5 or 6 of his buddies up to Canada, treated them, everybody, and
Goes quick.
that money was gone. Yeah. Yeah, so, and that happens to a lot of guys when they
Sure.
come home.
Well, there's a distinction that can be made too. Like, you know, we've mentioned other wars. You go over there, and even the trenches of World War I, it was a war. But the wars over there were occupations.
Well, and they're
And that
very
is
different.
that is a very different thing.
It's
a lot.
very
It's more
different.
traumatic in some ways.
Yeah, and I've met people who've been deployed a couple of times. The first mission was a combat mission. The second mission, they were in a village in Afghanistan, and it was a peacekeeping mission.
That's the scariest
And
one.
that is very confusing and very scary. You know, if you're taught the first mission, there's a threat everywhere, and then you're supposed to be in the community making friends with farmers and, you know, families. It's very challenging
At the
for
same time,
people.
you're breaking down doors and
Right,
terrorizing
right.
families because there might have been a report of
Right, and frisking people,
yeah,
and
it-
checkpoints and all that
That's
stuff.
I think
yeah.
that's I think what's created a lot of suicides is the activities in that occupation is just it's just over the top.
It's what you do when you go to war. I think that creates that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I-
yeah, yeah,
I guess I wanted just to comment about what I went through
yeah.
when I got out of the service. I came home and I did absolutely nothing for
You
30 days.
Came home from where?
Fort Lewis. I hadn't gone anywhere.
Okay.
It wasn't
okay.
like that.
Okay.
But still, it was. You can still say traumatic. I did absolutely nothing for 30 days, and then I was ready to go back to work.
Did you drink during those 30 days?
No, I don't drink at all.
Okay. Okay. But you just didn't. You couldn't do anything. You didn't have motivation to do anything.
No, I just wanted to take it easy. No,
Okay.
I was very
Settle out.
specific.
Okay. Yeah.
Very
yeah.
specific about taking it easy.
Cool. I think that probably was
Yeah.
a really good thing to do.
Yeah, it was in my case. anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the military trains people really really well to go to war. You know, they shut off that fight or flight system, and create a reaction system so that you're always on high alert, you're hypervigilant, you've got lots of hormones running through, cortisol and other things that keep you pumped up, and then, you know, it doesn't get turned off immediately when you come
Yeah.
home.
It's like doing heavy exercise, but then not doing a cooling off stretching period when it's over.
Kind of an example,
All the
yeah.
chemicals are up like
Yeah,
that, and there's
yeah.
there's nowhere for them to go, and,
And
they
I've-
turn
yeah.
poisonous.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of guys and gals just want to go back.
I was
You know?
going to ask also,
Yeah.
difference between Marines and Army people? Mm-hmm. Anything
You know, because I don't know who my providers serve,
Oh, okay.
I don't know, but I would say it's harder for Marines to ask for help.
Oh, Okay.
That's been my experience. I don't know if it's true across the board, but
Okay.
I think because of the way that they're trained.
doesn't mean anything either way. I would
No,
think.
but I think it's harder for them to
Yeah.
ask for help. We actually, you know, I can know how many people we're serving because our providers track their clients by a number. Our database creates a random number for every client, and then they add the number of hours each year that that client received, and that's how we know how many hours we serve and how many people and what their gender is. But as far as what their treatment was or what their needs were, I don't really know that unless somebody steps forward and to say thank you, which happens a few times a year. And last fall, a young man called and said, I want to come into the office to thank you personally.
Okay.
And he came in and he was seeing one of our counselors, and he was a Marine. He had served, I think, 1 or 2 tours. And it turned out that he was having a pretty hard time, but because he hadn't been wounded, he didn't think he deserved to get help.
Yeah.
Okay, he was having issues emotionally, psychologically, but buddies of his were hurt a lot worse or killed. So he was fine, he was doing really well. And then his best buddy committed suicide, and that kind of sent him over the edge. And his grandparents turned out to be donors of ours, and they gave him our brochure. And he went and got help. And he was able to stay in college after that. And in fact, he emailed me, I think it was in April, to say that he had won an international photography contest, or he was one of the award winners of an international photography contest, and was having a show at Marylhurst University. And could I help get word out? So that made me feel great. But that doesn't happen very often. And you know, I have been told by some people that combat vets need to be treated by therapists who are combat vets.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think that's true myself. I don't think you have to have been raped to treat somebody who's a rape victim. I think you can have compassion and empathy for the experience, and create counseling is about creating a relationship with people. And I asked him that question. I said, I have been told that, you know, for somebody like you who was in combat, it might have been better for you to see a therapist who was also a combat vet. And he said, you know, for me, I felt so much shame about needing to ask for help that I would not be able to tell another vet what I was going through.
Can't
So
win.
I think, you know, it's a good thing we're here, because some people can talk to our therapists who look like me, maybe, like a mom or a grandmom, and other people do want that vet sitting across from them who understands what they went through. So we're all
Sure.
different. Even if you're a vet, you're different from your buddy who's a vet in that way. So I think options are really important.
Well, we know we're all different, but we've all suffered damage in our life, and we
We
can
have,
relate
haven't
to
we?
it
We can,
through that
in some
damage,
way,
you
yeah,
know, somehow.
Talk
Absolutely.
about go through the same wars. I guess that's where it happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
One quick thing I was thinking about, I know a lot of in prisons and different places, people use dogs and animals to help. Has there been any movement towards, you know, working with animal groups to?
Yeah, we've done some partnering, and there's a group in Battleground, Washington, and I can't remember. I think it's Battle Buddies, something like
Battle
that, and
Buddies.
they
That's
train
good.
dogs. I think that's what it is. Don't quote me, but
Oh, I'll
they
try.
train service dogs to work with people with PTSD, and it's great.
Okay.
And there was actually, right after I got this job, there was a show, an Oprah show, that had a vet on with very, very severe PTSD, so severe that you could see him leave his body and just
Just drift.
drift.
Yeah.
They got him a dog, and the dog sensed when it was about to happen and would just put his nose against him, and the guy came back just like that. He was then able to leave his house, go out into the world, interact with his kids because he had this dog. So I think that's
Sure.
really cool. Yeah.
They can tell when an epileptic seizure, stroke,
Exactly.
all this stuff is coming
Exactly.
They're
on.
Yeah.
amazing.
That's
Aren't they?
interesting.
Yeah.
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 So well, we've been down to what, 8 minutes, something like that.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we've
So-
talked about the suicide. We've talked about the sexual trauma. And we really haven't gone much into homelessness. And there's some whole pile of statistics on that. Like 30% of your homeless are vets, and you hear
Yeah.
these different figures.
hear
but
different
you know it's
figures.
high.
It's high. I think, you know, in Portland, the homeless agencies do a count every year. And I think the last one showed 7% of the homeless population reported that they were vets. You know, but you have to ask the right question. And women who served, especially prior to this, often will not admit having been in the military.
Oh, my.
Because of the military sexual trauma issue for them, or because, you know, they weren't deployed, they were behind a desk, so they don't feel worthy of being called a vet. So a better question might be, have you ever served in the military? And maybe they ask that now, but they, you know, they didn't used to. So
That's how you frame it. Yeah.
it's how you frame it for people. Yeah, yeah, and people who are dishonorably discharged. You know, that's happened a lot after multiple deployments. Somebody has PTSD, they're still active duty, they start acting out in different ways, and then they get a dishonorable discharge, and they're not able to go to the VA for any services.
That's got me. It's
That's
victims.
terrible. That's terrible.
Right, so those VSO people I talked about that work for counties, the Veteran Services Officers, they can help start that appeal process to get your discharge rating changed, and we don't ask. So anybody who served in Iraq or Afghanistan can come in. It does not matter if they were dishonorably discharged. They can get
Oh, yeah,
they can
I'm
get
sure
services.
that-
So that's important, I think, because it's happened way too much that that is the case.
Well, service is service, you know,
Exactly.
and sometimes you dishonorable
Yeah.
discharge. You have not dishonored the service; it has dishonored you,
Yeah.
and it's quite the other way
Yeah,
around.
it's
Still
framed
can't get
differently,
over
isn't it?
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I do want to say we take donations. That's how we keep going. So
Okay.
we're part of what's called the Veterans Charity Challenge right now. It's sponsored by Craig Newmark, the guy that started Craigslist. And there's about 90 veterans charities throughout the nation that are up on this website. And we have a button on our homepage at returningveterans.org, and you can go and make a donation. And if we raise the most money of any other charity, we'll get an extra $20,000. Do you know how many vets that would help us serve? How many providers that would help
yeah.
us to get across the state?
You
It
could
would be
maybe you
amazing.
could maybe expand a little bit.
Expand, yes, absolutely. Especially in Southern Oregon, we've had people from the VA there call us and say, "We need you guys to get more providers here," and we're trying, but it's another area that's kind of hard to get
Sure.
people to volunteer.
So you're probably centered mostly in Vancouver and Portland. Then.
Portland Metro and down to Eugene and Salem. We have people in Corvallis and Monmouth and Salem and Kaiser.
Sure.
And they have
Yeah.
more money troubles down there too.
They do. It's
Taxes
harder to
and,
find a job. Yeah.
The sheriffs and police. There's not enough
Sure.
money for them.
And
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a lot of soldiers that come out of Eastern Oregon and Eastern Washington and Bend and all those areas
Yep,
because there's no
Ontario
jobs
and-
for them
yeah,
there when they get
yeah,
out.
yeah.
So that's where they go. It's a jobs program.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know
absolutely.
that's something I was going to mention earlier. I mean the bullshit that's given by the recruiters that they're going to have. You know they're going to have
What they do in the military will translate into civilian life.
and
yeah.
not very often.
My son was
Your
lucky
son
in that
was
it
lucky,
did
yeah.
for him, but yeah, especially like if you were a sniper or what, you know.
Or just
can't
any
translate
infantry.
That. Infantry, yeah, yeah.
Maybe
A lot of guys go in, and gals become police officers,
Yeah.
you know, firefighters,
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of jobs, emergency services technicians, EMTs. So, yeah,
Sure.
those jobs are a great fit, but there are only so many jobs.
There is, and if somehow you manage to get into the motor pool or the mess or some of those places
Yeah.
where it translates out when you get out there. But it's kind of scary. There's a high percentage of PTSD, and now they're police officers with guns. That's pretty scary
it's
to
20
me.
to 30% of people come back with PTSD. So that means 70% of people, they probably need, like you do, you did. They need to calm down, take it easy, figure out what they want to do next. But most people are pretty resilient. So, but that 30%, you know, some of those folks really, really need a lot of help,
Sure.
you know, over a long period of time.
And the statistics don't necessarily run straight through that way, but 3 out of 10 then that's 3 out of 10 of police officers have a possibility of having issues.
Well, and
And
just becoming a police officer, you know, there's a lot of research out there that they have PTSD as well.
Yeah, that maximizes. They're carrying
Right.
weapons, you know, the weapons
Right.
go off, it brings back memories.
Or
It's pretty
they're
scary.
threatened often, you know.
They're threatened. Yeah, I've known, you know, back hometown, an officer was walking up steps on a domestic dispute and got blown away by a
Yeah,
shotgun.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that is aware, and that's always over your head.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
And
you
then-
asked what we were doing to help, and I think we're doing a lot. I think there's a lot of people that will be
Yeah.
so much more aware of what's
I
going
hope
on.
so. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And what do we have? We still have like a
Yeah,
couple,
we
3
still-
minutes.
yeah,
Anything
we
you
still
want to
have-
do? Lot to sum up
A
here.
lot to sum up. So we expect so we have 31,000 Iraq and Afghanistan war vets here now.
Right.
And the
That's
Oregon
cool.
Department of Veterans Affairs expects another 30,000 to return to our state over the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that's
With
right.
troop
So-
withdrawals from Afghanistan and Defense Department budget cuts. And the National Guard has been cut quite a bit here. I think we've had 14,000 Guard members deployed, and now we're down to 9,000 National Guard members. So the numbers have been cut. Some of the people who've been in a long time and have been in command positions, their positions have been cut, and that's happening across the country. So we have a reintegration team right now. It's called JTAP, the Joint Transition Assistance Program, and there are people in every region that work for the Guard that will work with, their job is to help people get jobs. Veterans of any
Yeah.
era, their job
Right.
is to help people get jobs. And you can just Google National Guard JTAP, and you can find them and contact them, and they'll help you. They will serve vets of any era, and it's not just jobs. If you are a mom like me, your son is saying he's going to kill himself, he's in the bathroom, the door's locked, you can call them. Call the Veterans Crisis Line first, but you can also call the JTAP person, and they will come and they will talk to him and talk him down, take him to the emergency room, do whatever needs to be done. It might take them a while to get there, but they are a great resource, and they're funded now. Every year, Senators Wyden and Merkley have had to fight for funding for them, and they're funded through, I think, September 2015. And then my guess is it will be challenging because, you know, the war is going to be over. Which does not mean that
Yeah,
people aren't
which
going to need
doesn't
help for
mean that
another 30 or
anything.
40
It's going to be a
years.
lot worse. And you know, and we need folks like that because it's quite often that police officers show up in situations like that, and they quite
They make the
not that that
wrong-
person's necessarily
Yeah.
a serviceman, but they eventually, you know, often kill that person,
I
wanna-
know.
and
I know.
and that's pretty
I
scary.
want to thank you for coming on, and
Thank
I think,
you.
and I want to thank our crew for helping and making the show possible. We're going to, when we go now, we're going to show the times, or replay times, so that if you could put those up when our time's up now. And
Write them down and pass them on, because this is an important segment here, I think.
Yeah, well, I've got some copies too, of course.
Right.
But there.
You are watching the Independent Producers Organization program. This program replays on these channels, at these times, and on these days. Write it down and tell your friends.
The people of Portland, we are the Aztec Lancer people from Mexico, and our roots are from indigenous people. We're here to say no to GMO, to respect our food. We all are brothers and sisters from the corn. We all eat from the Mother Earth. Be respectful. We're here because your struggle is a struggle. Let's fight together.
Are you ready? Are you ready to march against Monsanto? Are you ready to march for your human rights? You know, something is happening in Oregon. Something is in the air. Something happened in Jackson. Something happened in Josephine. And something's going to happen with Legally. You know, today, later on, you're going to hear from Brian Combs, who's one of the key people in Jackson County. I was glad to be there for 3 months helping, and that's what we must all do, is to do our parts. Monsanto is fighting for profits. We are fighting for our lives. We are fighting for our lives. You know, history is being made in Oregon. We're part of history. Just like the women who fought in the suffragette movement, they made history. Just like Martin Luther King in the civil rights movement, he made history. It was difficult. Just the same way, the man Cesar Chavez, who I worked with as an organizer, we made history with the United Farm Workers. You know, the United Farm Workers, under their union contracts, were the first to ban DDT. All of us, I'm sure all of us here, were involved in supporting South Africa and helped to free Nelson Mandela. That was a struggle. He was in prison for 27 years, but he did not give up. And we in Oregon are not going to give up. I'm going to do a little dictionary education today. Monsanto has a funny name. At the end of it, it says Santo, which is Spanish for saint and sacred. Monsanto means sacred mountain. There's nothing sacred about that. There's nothing holy about Monsanto. So today, we might call it Bon Diablo, or the devil. It's not Monsanto. Nothing sacred about poisoning people. Nothing sacred about making profits over lives. You know, in this struggle, we have to think, because we have a powerful enemy, people to work against. It's really like that historical story of David against Goliath. You remember that? But really, if you think about it, in history, if women would have been writing the books, it might have been Diane against Goliath. So that really doesn't matter now, because we need both David and Diana. And David and Diana together will stop Goliath. David and Diana can win. You know, Martin Luther King would remind us that it really doesn't matter how long you live, but what you did when you were alive. It really doesn't matter how powerful your friends were, how many awards you get, but what you did in your life. You know, longevity has its place. We all want to live a long life, but it really doesn't matter how long you live unless you did something with your life. Now, you know, one more thought. Listen up now. Really doesn't matter the promises we make, but the promises we keep. Every day, we're making promises we don't keep. I'm gonna Facebook you. I'll remember you. Let's have lunch. We make promises we don't keep. Now there are promises that we must keep. Here's an interesting promise. I'll love you forever. It's not the promises we make, but the promises you keep. You must make a promise to the people of Oregon, to the people of India, to the people of Mexico, to the people of Asia, to stop Monsanto. You must make that promise, and we must keep it together. We need everybody. So if you aren't registered to vote, get registered. If you haven't signed the petition, sign the petition. It's not the promises we make, but the promises we keep.
The tape?
The next tape?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right, hey, we're back. That was an excellent first section.
That Monsanto.
That rally was there was one last year. It was quite a few more people, but this year it was downtown, and I forget what it was, about 3-4 weeks ago. It was a good rally, and I just put up a couple of the speakers real quickly and some of the marching footage.
Well, I kind of just recently figured out what that was all about. They're trying to genetically modify so that they can use pesticides or some chemicals on what they're growing.
They're genetically putting some kind of gene inside the plant that
makes it okay for them.
It's resistant to the herbicide, and for some reason they say, well, that way they can use less herbicide. Well, hell, they use more.
Yeah,
because it's resistant to it.
They're using too much.
Right, and it's mainly 2,4-D, which is half the formula for Agent Orange, and Roundup.
That's right.
And Roundup is it's called Roundup Ready.
Oh,
and then there's also there's other there's corn, wheat, and soy. Pretty much all the corn, wheat, and soy, unless expressly set aside, it's all genetically modified.
Isn't that going into a vote, or isn't there going to be?
Well, they're trying to get the signatures up right now, and it's I'm trying to remember the website. I guess, you know, if people want to just Google
Monsanto.
2014 Oregon campaign to label food, you'll find it pretty easily. It's Oregonians' right to know, something like that. And you know, it is your
Yeah.
right to know.
Right.
The right to know what's going on with your food. I mean,
That's-
and then you can make the choice. But you know, it would be difficult at this point to separate that out in a lot of these foodstuffs because it's just so prevalent. All the food is just, whether it's GMO soy or not GMO soy, it's all put together in one vat. So they'd have to make, you know, separate it, and they'd have to label it. And what they always scream is it's just going to cost more money, and then the consumers will pay more money, and then the consumers vote it out. They voted it out here. They voted it down in Washington. They voted it down in California. But they're
Really?
coming back around again 2 years later, and I think they're going to pass this time. And it just passed in Vermont, and Monsanto and DuPont are suing Vermont over this. They're going to try to
Sue the voter.
sue the voter. Oh, well, I don't know who they're suing now that you mentioned it, but
Yeah.
they're suing to have that law turned away. And they've been working in local legislatures and in different states to try to preempt labeling by making it against the law to pass genetically modified organism labeling, and they're trying to do it nationally in Washington D.C. to just preempt all of that.
Yeah.
And you know, they might have their way. Monsanto has their way because you know, a
They
lot of
do.
Monsanto people who work for Monsanto end up having a revolving door into the government and back out to the industry.
And they sued farmers, and they won against the farmers.
A guy named Percy up in Canada, he was growing something, and his crop got adulterated. Organic crop got adulterated with the genetically modified organism, whatever that crop was, and instead of him suing them, they sued him and won.
Yeah, that's
So,
the kind of thing that's happening.
Pretty scary stuff.
That's right. And the poison and the chemicals that are used in all those, you know, they really find their ways down rivers, into diets, and to what we eat.
And the fertilizers,
And,
sure.
and the chemicals can go straight into the ocean along with sewage and everything else.
And along with the pollen too will cross pollinate and adulterate other crops of the same kind of crop. And they had that issue. They've had issues with genetically modified grasses here, and we have a large sod, lawn sod industry. And there's been some real issues with some of the testing of the genetically modified seeds over in Central Oregon. It's already made it over here, and it's adulterated the crops here. I mean, the earth turns, and there's winds and everything. You can't keep this stuff.
Away, that's right.
It's just
gonna
like
spread
with
out
genetically
everywhere.
modified salmon. They're trying to stop that. I think Jeff Merkley's involved in trying to stop that.
This is only this going sideways, but I have seen pictures of the the
Fukushima?
and from the sky, and it shows this stuff coming out all the time. It's all coming out all over the entire ocean. I know it's just sideways from what we're talking
Sure.
about, but it's still to do with polluting, and that isn't going to stop for a while. That-
And it's probably never going to stop.
Yeah,
At least
yeah.
not in I don't know what the half-life of some of that stuff is, but the half-life of some things are 1,000,000 years. Some radioactive isotopes and such.
yeah.
And so that's that's half-life. There's still another half left.
Oh, right. That's right.
So
Still-
and, things like plutonium, it's fairly short. It's in the numbers, just a few thousand, but still a few thousand. The longest empire, whatever I can think of, was like the Roman Empire, was like 900 years or 1,000 years, and we're pretending that we're gonna be around for thousands and thousands of years to protect the planet
Yeah.
of this stuff and keep it encased when it's already been leaking since 1963 up in Hanford,
Yeah, that's
starting
right.
90 into the Columbia River. It just doesn't make sense. So we're really a Pollyanna when it comes to this. We accept what the corporations say, that they can be trusted. And they've demonstrated they cannot be trusted.
And that stuff was put down in barrels in the bottom of the ocean off the coast.
Salt water, which rusts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no chance it cannot be
No.
spread out over long periods of time. And so that still comes in.
All this brings up a good point and segue into the video. And the video is about
Yeah, okay.
energy. It's about coal and oil. And we keep
doing the same things expecting something different, because you know we have other alternative forms of energy. If the oil and the coal and the gas companies that are making billions of dollars off this would stop digging and put that energy and that money into finding alternatives. I mean, I saw on TV a while back, somebody was talking, look what we did in just a few years. John Kennedy said, we're going to the moon. And goddamn, we went to the moon. You know how difficult that was? I would think that being able to maximize our research into you know, wind and solar and all that, and coming up with some decent batteries and ways to make this stuff more prevalent in our society, that would be small potatoes compared to going to the moon, I would think.
That's right.
You know, and launching these split-second things into space and bringing people back. We could do it, but why aren't we doing it? You know, it's pretty crazy. And this video is a woman who's going to be speaking about you know, why we should all jump in. But you know, before we go into that, you have anything to top off the program here?
No, we've done very good. I thought that first hour was just great, hearing that information.
And she's going to be on other programs here on Public Access too.
Right, it was probably
my show, and then on this last Saturday of the month, she'll be on the Veterans for Peace Forums, a perfect forum for her. That's the last Saturday of the month on Channel 11 at 7 o'clock, and that's produced by Kelly Labonte. And so, and I guess we can go into that. This is about a 44-minute piece. We'll be able to catch most of it. So we'll be back next month.
Yeah. Okay.
Distinct honor of welcoming our speaker today, Professor Kathleen Dean Moore, for a conversation about nothing less than the survival of the planet. A heated debate about fossil fuel exports in the region has set the stage perfectly for her talk today. So Professor Moore has spent many years pondering the dilemma of right action in a complicated world. So, among other published works, she's the co-editor of Moral Ground, Ethical Action for a Planet in Peril, which is a compilation work of 100 or so great thinkers around the world and their thoughts about the impending climate crisis. So, so I would just say to you that you should prepare to be challenged and encouraged by what you hear today. So on behalf of all the members of our Climate Action Coalition, including Physicians for Social Responsibility, Greenpeace, 350 PDX, Interfaith Power and Light, and the tireless McKinley family, I present Professor Kathleen Dean Moore.
Oh man, it is really thrilling to see all of you here today. I mean, it is thrilling to me that you came out here. You know, why are you here? You could be shopping. You could be drag racing. You could be doing any number of soul-devouring things, but instead, you decided to come out here into this community of caring, and I understand that decision completely. Thank you for coming. And I have to say that it's a thrill for me too, and a little bit nervous-making, because I feel that today is kind of a coming out for me. I have left the university so that I could use all my work and time towards climate change. So, you don't have to call me Professor Moore anymore. That's all right. You never did. I feel that that is a time when a person who has been active can make the transition to becoming an activist. I don't know quite what that means, but I feel that today is the time to figure it out. And so thank you very, very much. I think your example is going to be huge for me and for each of the other people in this room and beyond. I feel, and you'll have to tell me if you share this, I feel that we're rising on a cresting wave. I feel that all across the country, People all around the world. Isn't that right? Do you have that feeling? Finally. Finally, after a kind of silence, like the silence of an abused spouse, finally we are coming to be able to speak our minds, and we're standing shoulder to shoulder and taking back our rights and our communities and our democracy, our futures, and our health. And it seems as though maybe some of our leaders, maybe, are going to follow our lead. That would be a very good thing. And it's about time. I don't need to tell you that the atmosphere is now collecting every day heat equivalent to the explosion of 400,000 Hiroshima bombs every day, today, and 365 days a year. I've been sending out a quiz to everybody I can think of, and it goes like this. It tells that fact about the Hiroshima bombs, and then it says, if your house is on fire, what should you do? A, stare into the flames and say, this isn't happening. B, loudly debate whether the fire was caused by human agency, an arsonist, or by nature, natural variation in the temperature of the house. C, write grants to study how fast the fire is advancing. D, appoint commissions to study how to adapt to life in the burnt-out rubble of a house that once was inexpressibly beautiful. Of course not. You put out the damn fire. You throw everything you've got to it. There are children in that house. There are billions of children in that house. And according to a new letter from 500 scientists led by a team from Stanford University, I'm sure you got this message as well, by the time today's children have grown to middle age, the life support systems of the earth will be irretrievably damaged unless we take concrete, immediate action. Who are the children? I know one of them. Her name is Zoe, and she's my granddaughter. She's 6. And in the evening, she lies in bed with her nightlight on because she's just a little bit afraid of the dark. And she sings and she giggles herself to sleep. Her new song is laugh, kookaburra, gay your life must be. When she's middle-aged, if we don't take immediate action, the Earth's life support systems will be irretrievably damaged. Water to drink, fresh air to breathe, food systems to sustain her. Zoe, my Zoe. And I hear that child giggling, and I say to myself, that's it, it's over. I'm not going to do anything in my working life but try to make the world safe for the laughter of children who are just a little bit afraid of the dark. Well, the first thing then that is very important to say is we can do this. Yes. We can. We can keep the temperature rise below 2 degrees, which gives the children at least a chance. Gives them at least a chance for a thriving life. And James Hansen, as you well know, ran the numbers. If we start this year, 2013, and achieve a 6% global reduction in carbon emissions this year, 6% every subsequent year, and at the same time, if we begin a massive reforestation plan and a massive soil sequestration campaign, we can keep the temperature below 2 degrees Celsius rise. Yes. We can. If we wait until 2020, it's a 15% rise. If we wait until 2030, it's too late. So that's our work this year, 6%. We can do that. The second thing I want to say is I want to be really clear about what I believe. There may not be any doubt, but I come to this as an environmental ethicist. And the thing that becomes clear to me is that although climate change is a scientific issue, and we're grateful for the help of people like James Hansen and other scientists, and although it's a political and an economic issue, global warming is primarily a moral issue. It's a result of a moral failure, and it calls for a moral response. So it's not just that it's monumentally stupid, it's wrong to wreck the world. What could be clearer? And to take what we need for our profligate lives and to leave this ransacked and dangerously unstable world for our children, that's not worthy of us as moral beings. And to let it all slip away, all those little lives, the plants and the animals, the song of a frog, the stripes in the throat of a lily, the scent of a Douglas fir, to let it slip away because we're too busy, or because we have to get the kids to soccer practice, or because we don't care enough, that's wrong. And when fossil fuel companies, to make astonishing and unimaginable profits, show themselves willing to take down the systems that sustain our lives, to sustain human life as we know it on Earth, that's moral monstrosity on a cosmic scale. That's what we're up against. This glibness from the oil companies, this kind of blithe disregard, this disdain that the fossil fuel companies show for us and for the world, that's what angers me. Don't worry, Rex Tillerson says, who made $320 million last year as the chairman of ExxonMobil. Human beings have adapted for millennia. We will adapt to this. And then that wonderful the advertisement you've seen about the resiliency of the Earth. Maybe you've seen it. It's a picture of the globe, beautiful picture of the globe from space. And it's a mobile ad, and underneath it says, Mother Earth is a tough old gal. That kind of disdain. I wrote to them, and I said, if the Earth were your mother, she would grab you in one rocky hand and hold you underwater until you no longer moved. I should be ashamed. And the other thing is, I am a philosopher and I'm not supposed to say things like that. That's not philosophical, that is more like ranting. And what we need is moral reasoning, and I do believe that. I don't want to be glib either. What we need is moral reasoning. We need to be clear about what we care about, and we need to give reasons to support those. And that these reasoned public discourse is what we need, a reasoned public discourse that allows us to affirm our deepest beliefs, check them against our experience and the experience of other people. So scientists have reached an overwhelming consensus on the facts of climate change, backed up by evidence. What we need is a corresponding consensus about the moral urgency of climate change. The moral urgency of climate change backed up by our very best reasons. So some years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, my colleague Michael Nelson and I decided that what we could do as philosophers is try to create this international conversation about what we really care about. So we wrote to about 100 of the world's moral leaders, people like Desmond Tutu and Wangari Maathai and the Dalai Lama, and we asked them, in 2,000 words or less, to answer this question. Do we have a moral obligation to the future to leave a world as rich in possibilities as our own? We got back a stunning set of responses, and we put them together and categorized them and came up with 14 really good reasons why we have an obligation to stop climate change now for the sake of the future. I won't read all of them, but for the survival of humankind, for the sake of the children, for the sake of justice, to prevent the greatest violation of human rights the world has ever seen, because compassion requires it, because we love the world, for the sake of all forms of life on the planet, and for the stewardship of God's creation, and the list goes on. So I thought that today it would be worthwhile pausing just for a little while to talk about some of those reasons, just to be reminding ourselves why we came out on a lovely day to engage in this kind of action. I've chosen 3. Philosophers can't help themselves. Everything in philosophy comes in 3s. And in fact, if you're taking notes today, this is going to be really easy. I have 3 points to make, and each point has 3 subpoints. I'm going to ask, why are we doing this work? What makes it hard and challenging? And third, what do we need to do? Okay, so first of all, why do we need to stop climate change? Well, one reason I've picked out, maybe randomly, is for the sake of justice. And we all know that climate change is a violation of justice. And the problem isn't just that people are going to suffer, but that they're going to suffer unjustly in violation of any principle of equitable distribution. And that some of us are going to enjoy the presumed advantages of the reckless consumption of fuels and fossil goods, and in the process we're going to make some of us insanely rich. And at the same time, other people are going to suffer from this profligate burning because we're offloading the consequences of our actions onto the people who have never known its benefits, won't know its benefit, and are powerless to resist. Who are the people who are powerless to resist? Who are the ones with no voices? Future people? Plants and animals? Marginalized people, geographically margins, peoples on the margins of the continent, people on the margins of the economy, and the children. Who speaks for them? What in God's name did they do to deserve what's coming at them? And while I'm asking about deserving, what did the oil companies deserve to get these riches? You know, Carl Safina wrote in this book, he says, this is our shame, not only because we choose it, it's shame because the unborn who did not choose it will come saddled with all conceivable consequences. Shame because the poor who did not choose it will be hit hard and worst. That is not merely unsustainable, that is unjust. So that's the first reason that I would cite for you, and then I see your head shaking. I'm telling you what you already know, and I apologize for that. You already know that if we don't act to slow climate change, to stop the oil industry, that we will be betraying our children. So let's talk about the kids. Of course they didn't make this mess. Of course they don't deserve what's coming at them. Nevertheless, they're going to have to live in whatever's left of the world after we get done using it up, wrecking it. Water shortages, collapsed agricultural systems, collapsed fishery systems, spreading disease, wars for resources, already documenting increasing violence in the overwhelming temperatures, great massive movements of people driven from their homes. So I asked my friend Brian Doyle, he's a Portland poet, you must know Brian. I said, Brian, put this in words for me. Why do we have this obligation to our children? And here's what he wrote me. Because we swore and vowed to every god we ever imagined or invented or dimly sensed that we would care for our children with every iota of our energy when they came to us miraculously from the sea of the stars. Because they are the very definition of innocent, and every single blow and shout and shiver of fear that rains down upon them is utterly undeserved and unfair and unwarranted. Because we used to be them, and we remember dimly what it was like to be small and frightened. And I would add to that, because we promised them. Our children came into the world, we held them in our arms, and with tears in our eyes, we promised them that we would give them the world, that we would do whatever was necessary to keep them safe in that world. And so here's what obsesses me. What are we going to say when we come toward the end of our lives and our grandchildren come to us with their own babies in their arms and they ask us what we did to stop climate change? And before we can bring our shaking voices to answer, they're going to interrupt us and they're going to say, don't tell me you didn't know. You knew. Don't tell me you thought there was time. There wasn't. Don't tell me you didn't know what to do. Anything would have been better than nothing. Don't tell us that the forces against you were too great. Nothing is greater than the forces against us now. Reason number 3, I thought that since we were in this beautiful space, that we ought to make some sort of reference at least to divine creation. Do you remember, perhaps, coming into a space just like this and singing for the beauty of the earth, for the glory of the skies, some of you? And the last line, our grateful praise. Our grateful praise. You know, climate change, I believe, is a failure of reverence. It's a failure to honor and protect all the little lives in the forests and the seas and the bird, frog, all the things of creation. Now, I don't know if you believe that the world was created by God, or if you think that it was created by the creative urgency of the universe, and it doesn't really matter. If it's God, do not think for 1 minute that God is indifferent to the fate of his creation. God is the one who took the time every single day to say, and it was good. And I don't know if an omniscient being can feel grief, but I can imagine God pressing his fist against his mouth in sorrow and in rage to keep from crying out in the night. And if God is out there crying out, how can we hear him if it's not in the storms and in the floods and in the droughts? But let's just say that you don't believe in God. And let's say you think that the world was created by this beautiful creative urgency that has created all the universe and the solar system and the planets. Even under those circumstances, you recognize, I'm sure, that this world, this planet is irreplaceable. These life forms are irreplaceable. They're essential. They're beautiful and fearsome. They are beyond human understanding. They are crazy creative. That kind of language, that's the language of the sacred. So even if you believe that God didn't create the world, but that it created itself, even so, reckless destruction is a failure of reverence. So that's what I would offer you in my way of reasons, those 3 reasons for why we need to take action, and we really can't wait. There are many, many other reasons, but those are the 3 that speak strongly to me. Now, before I go on to the second thing, I want to check the mic. Are you hearing me all right in the back? Okay. Would you rather I backed away so I don't pop my peas? Okay, then what I want to do is move on to the second major topic, which is what is making it hard? Why has it been so hard for us to take action? What's blocking us? When we have these overwhelming reasons to act that we've just articulated, reasons that are based on our most fiercely held values, why is it so hard to get moving? And I believe it's because we believe 3 things that are false. So let me offer you up these 3 falsehoods that I think make it very hard for us to move forward and for our neighbors to move forward and for all the people who aren't here to move forward in case they create some sort of talking points for other people. Now here I might be challenging you a little bit. First of all, I don't believe what everyone is saying is that we have met the enemy and he is us. I want to be really careful about that because it's really tricky. You all know what externalization is, right? That the reason that the fossil fuel industry creates such beautiful, incredible profits, for one reason, is that it externalizes its costs on the universe, on us, and our children. It clears the air through our lungs. It clears the water through our digestive systems. That is an externalization of its cost. And what we are seeing today, I do believe, is the externalization of shame. And that this may be one of the biggest triumphs of big oil, to make consumers blame themselves for climate change, even while the corporations are spending billions of dollars to transform us into mindless consumers of self-destructive and cheap consumer goods and fossil fuels. To make us blame ourselves, even while they're leveraging their bribes to Congress to be sure that we don't have alternative ways to heat our homes, to travel to our jobs, and to find some way to ease our grief at this fundamental disconnection from the earth that we love. So when I hear people say, we have met the enemy and it is us, I say in my most philosophical voice, that's bullshit. Now, of course, we should spend and invest and work and travel more thoughtfully. That's huge. Of course, we should all dramatically cut our use of fossil fuels. And that said, I didn't cut corners and cause an oil gusher in the Gulf of Mexico. And I'm not the one who's doing my best to undermine the EPA. And I'm not lobbying, or what we call bribing Congress, to open drilling in the Arctic Ocean. I didn't cut funding for alternative energy sources. I'm not sitting around in a boardroom plotting how to use every loophole and law and lawyer and lie to run over the people who are trying to protect their homes. The point I want to make is that the big oil companies are very happy to claim that they are simply responding to public demand, but it is very clear how much the corporations have been manipulating public demand. So we have met the enemy, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it isn't me. But while big oil is externalizing all its other costs on me, I will not allow them to externalize the moral shame of its attack on the earth. That's one. Number two falsehood that I think is making a lot of trouble for us. Now, this one was called to my attention very recently by a person who emailed me. I get lots of emails out of the blue telling me how wrong I am about various things. And that's really useful, because of course I am. And then I get a chance to fix it. What he tells me is that do not be deceived. Climate change is not about climate change. Really. What is it? Now, I have to tell you a story. So I'm at this meeting of journalists in Missoula, and afterwards, just by happenstance, I happened to walk out the door and walk home with the representative from the American Petroleum Association. Huge man. Trench coat, shaved head, like big man. And I just decided I'm going to engage him in some conversation. And I start the conversation by saying, "Oh, do you have children?" He turns to me and he puts his chest in my face. And he says, "Don't you ever, 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 ever underestimate the power of the fossil fuel industry." I go, "Huh, that's the first thing you said today that I believed." What I think we're seeing is that climate change has become much more than climate change. The struggle to slow or stop climate change is also a struggle to reclaim democracy. Yes? Congress, and we will see about the president, are bought and sold like commodities, like corn or pork bellies, and the top 5 contributors to the last election, all of them, big oil. Fossil fuel industries spent $450 million to buy the last election. That's cheap if it allows the industry to continue to make those kind of profits. Exxon, and I'm quoting here our friend Bill McKibben, last year Exxon made a higher annual profit than any company in the history of money. Wow. Now Plato had it figured. Way, way back, Plato had it figured. He wasn't a fan of democracy because he thought that democracies were essentially unstable. That every democracy will ultimately, sooner or later, turn into a plutocracy, the rule by the rich, because you can always buy votes. And every plutocracy will necessarily, eventually evolve into anarchy, because at some point, the people won't put up with it anymore. It's very clear to me that we have reached the point of the plutocracy. What's not clear to me is whether we're going to be able to turn around and restore or regain a democracy, or whether we will have to move into anarchy and smaller groups and try to figure this out for ourselves. But I think it's that serious, the situation that we face right now. I also think that the struggle to slow or stop climate change is beyond climate change. Also, it's a struggle to reinvent who we are as human beings. That climate change has everything to do with the systematic dehumanization of persons on Earth. That climate change is what happens. These enormous profits are what happens when people believe that they are essentially individual, that they thrive in competition with everyone else. When they believe in the essential dualism of all creation, that humankinds are the pinnacle of creation, separate from and better from all the other creatures on Earth who exist only to serve our own needs and derive all their value from their value to serve our greed. Or whether when you believe in human exceptionalism, the notion that we're exceptions to all the ecological rules that govern the rest of the world. We had to believe that in order for capitalism to survive. In order for it to be okay to do what capitalism does, we had to have that worldview that was based on competition between individuals and the absolute reduction of all the rest of the world to mere material brutes. So what we have here is a chance to reimagine ourselves and to notice that this, what I'll call the Enlightenment worldview, this individualist, materialist, dualist, exceptionalist view, is a little blip in the history of humankind that arose simultaneously with capitalism, and my guess is that it will leave the planet when capitalism finds another place. What will take its place is what indigenous people, all the religions of the world except for the desert religions, and all the ecologists are telling us is true about human beings, that we are essentially members of communities of interdependent, interconnected parts, that the thriving of the whole depends on the thriving of the parts, that the thriving of the parts creates the thriving of the whole. We're not exceptions to the rules. We also are part of the earth that is finite and bound by these intricate interdependencies. So the struggle against climate change isn't only about climate change, it's a pivot point in human history. It's what has been called the Great Turning. It requires a new set of answers to the three big questions. What is the world? What is the place of a human being on the planet? And how then shall we live? Finally, I want to talk about the third mistake that I think makes this so hard. And that's the mistake that says this is hopeless, that there's nothing we can do. It's over, it's done. And that even if it weren't, there's nothing I can do as an individual in my life that's going to make any difference. You know, I was at a conference up in Sitka, and one of the people there got a phone call from her daughter, and his daughter says, "Hi, Mommy, where are you, and what are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I'm in Sitka, Alaska, and today my friends and I are going to save the world." And the little girl says, "Oh, well then I better let you go." You know, we laugh at ourselves when we say we're going to try to save the world, but it's about that, isn't it? We laugh at our ambitions, but it's about that. Okay, so let's face it, that our options are limited. Our cities and our homes and our transportation systems are disgracefully designed. Destructive ways of living are protected by tangles of profit and power around the world. Corporations are acting like psychopaths, and we have run out of time. That's where we are. And Gus Speth, the former dean of the forestry people over at Yale, says all we have to do to destroy the planet's climate and ecosystem and leave a ruined world to our children and our grandchildren is to keep doing exactly what we are doing today. This is a problem. We've built a society that's fixated on the future, and so we are readily disempowered by hopelessness. And I want to say that we're disempowered also by hope, that we need to leave them both aside. So blind hope, you know, it's going to be fine, you know, relax. Everything's going to be fine, is a kind of moral abdication. I don't have to do anything. And the earth is going to hell no matter what I do. That kind of blind despair, that's a kind of moral abdication, because I don't have to do anything then. So either I have this kind of blind hope, in which case I don't have to do anything, or I have blinding despair, in which case I don't have to do anything. Lucky me, either way, I don't have to do a darn thing. But that's a fallacy, a false dichotomy. But because between this hope and the despair is this broad moral ground that we call personal integrity, wholeness, moral integrity, acting in such a way, I'm sorry, I keep hitting that we honor our moral beliefs, to live gratefully, because we believe that life is a gift. Not because we believe we're saving the world, because we believe life is a gift. And to act reverently, because we believe the world is reverent, because we believe the world is sacred. To live simply, because we don't believe in taking more than our fair share. To act lovingly toward the earth, because we love it. Do you see what I'm saying? That there are motivations for acting that are beautiful and powerful and have nothing at all to do with the consequences of our action. Instead, they have everything to do with our moral motivations and consistency with what we believe is right and true. And what this means then is a fierce, tireless, and maybe ultimately tragic defense of the world against those who would wreck it. That, I think, is true. So what are we going to do? Barbara Kingsolver, you know this one? If you run out of hope at the end of the day, rise in the morning and put it on with your shoes. I would say if you run out of integrity at the end of the day, rise and put that on with your shoes. Either way, three things I think we can do. I call them the 3 C's: conscientious objection, creative disruption, and courageous, relentless citizenship. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about conscientious objection. This is a call to a way of life the call to conscientious objection is a response to a way of life that reduces us to consumers rather than moral agents. Now, soldiers used to say hell no to an unjust war. Can we say the same thing to an unjust but far more disastrous economic system? In other words, can we find the gumption to refuse to let big oil make us foot soldiers in its war against the world? What I'm saying is that every decision we make, how we travel, whether we travel, how we heat our homes, how we educate our children, how we work, how we invest our money, how we allow others to invest our money, speaks to who we are. And that by our decisions we can say, I believe in this, and I don't believe in that. I won't participate in that. I will fully invest myself in this. And don't think that those kind of objections to the system don't matter, because studies show that the one most powerful way to influence people to change is to show them that another person they respect, that would be you, has made a change. So conscientious objection, I think, is a joyous and liberating response. This is divestment. This is the bicycle. This is local food. This is the well-insulated home. This is recycled paper. This is the birth control pill. This is the potluck. This is the garden. This is the poison-free yard. These are all the things I believe in, and this is what I will do. And a note to parents. We have parents. Okay, and a note to grandparents. This is how to free your children from the tyranny of consumerism. I do believe we have a parental responsibility to be clear with our children about what they need, and that this is our chance. This is our chance to make good decisions about what they need and to refuse what they don't. So conscientious objection certainly applies to our decisions as parents. We can't be afraid not to buy them the right kind of soccer shoes. Creative, well, that's okay. We got some soccer parents here. That was applause from the soccer moms. We're feeling the kind of so the first C then would be conscientious objection. Hell no. I will not be a foot soldier in the war against the world. You can't make me do that. I will say, hell no, I won't be part of that. The second one, creative disruption. And this is what you all are involved in. The way I understand this is that we're trying to make moral arguments that speak to people, but that they're abstract. Almost everything I've said so far today is really abstract. We have to find a way to make the moral arguments in people's faces, and we have to give them moral muscle. And that this takes imagination, and it takes creative action that's based on all the wonderful, joyous human arts, music and theater, street parades, children's choirs, literature, all these beautiful human expressions of grief and glory, a call to witness, to tell the truth about the moral consequences of an oil-filled future. So if it's the truth that big coal is going to destroy the dreams of children, then I think we're going to have to tape the photos of the children to the tracks and force somebody to decide to run over them. I know. And if we can't do that, then can we face up to the facts that they are destroying the children? Or are we going to back away from that? I think we have to invite the children to draw pictures of their dreams and invite the drills to go through those pictures of the children's dreams. We have to find some way to make people understand the enormity of what is being done. This is the choir singing at the crossing. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's sad. This is the hearse that follows the fracking trucks everywhere they go. These are the funeral bouquets that they turn off to the logging site. It isn't always cute and it isn't always funny. But whenever you have a massive moral failure of government, when you have massive lying, somebody's going to have to tell the truth. And my suggestion is that our banners be banners that tell the truth, not just slogans, but truth-telling banners. What is going on? History's our guide. Every point in human history, in America at least that I've been able to see, have been the result, when we've had a major change, it's been the result of a rising wave of moral affirmation. You look back in history, a moral affirmation, we hold these truths to be self-evident, and the world changed forever. Another moral affirmation, on the first day of January in the year of our Lord 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state shall be then, thenceforth, and forever free. And the direction of history reversed its flow. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, and the troopers and the growling dogs stumbled back. Not right away, but they stumbled back. Hell no, I won't go. And a war ended. Not easily, not right away, but eventually. Earth shall be whole and life-sustaining, and humankind joyous and just. I don't want to say it's easy, but it'll be easier and lots more fun if it's creative. And if it uses all the forces, all the joyous, imaginative forces of the human mind to create this kind of truth-telling culture. And then finally, courageous and relentless citizenship. This is where the personal becomes the political. This is where democracy takes shape. This is where you make your voice heard by crying out in all forms. The first thing you do in the morning and the last thing you do at night, being heard. And now I'm going to say something that is actually backed up by scientific research. Because the question becomes, okay, we can make our voices heard, but what do we demand? What do we say must happen? And so I wrote to my colleagues, my economist friends, and my other kinds of friends who are studying these kind of things, and here's what they say. These are already part of your agenda. I'm so proud. I'm so pleased. Number one, stop, block, and prevent all investments that expand fossil fuel infrastructure. This means no coal port expansion, no coal trains, no liquid natural gas depots, no pipelines, no new roads to carry the equipment, no fracking pads, no suburban megaballs, no Keystone XL pipeline. Number two, immediate implementation of compulsory policies that restrict carbon pollution by price or regulation. It could be any combination of any of these, but we will not make progress until we are paying the real price in taxes that we're already paying the real price in the health of our children.